Let's look at the performance of the business. Mark, what are the highlights?
So I think if we look back over the last financial year, our UK business has performed probably slightly better than the market had anticipated, and largely in line with where we thought it would be. So it's continued to grow in double digits, and it's continued to improve its profitability. The group overall, though, posted results towards the bottom end of expectations from profit, and largely in line at the revenue line. And the reason for that is sits within our European business, where the progress that we've been making and expected to continue to make on margin in Germany, particularly in the first half of the year, tailed off into the second half of the year, and that resulted in us being towards the bottom end of expectations from a profit perspective.
We'll talk about Europe in a bit more detail shortly, but to concentrate on the UK, which is still the dominant part of your business, how big a shadow is Brexit?
I want to get away from talking about Brexit. I want to get away from...
I think everybody does.
Yeah, definitely. And so we can't think about Brexit as any kind of excuse per se. Brexit has created an environment that is not as positive as we would want it to be. But we have a growth mindset as a business, and we need to make things happen to continue our business on the trajectory, which is what we have been doing against an uncertain backdrop. I am, though, optimistic, not optimistic in terms of the whole Brexit process, but once it's done, whenever that happens, I think there's a wall of optimism that's coming once we get any kind of certainty. Because the consumer in the UK, I think, is displaying a recessionary type of wait-and-see behaviour. Meanwhile, you know, the pay is rising, employment figures have never been better. You know, the UK economy has proved to be phenomenally resilient. And so if it's that resilient in an environment where the consumer is displaying recessionary behaviour, then I think we can be hugely optimistic that wherever the end of that process is, that we're extremely well positioned for the other side of it. And I think it's fair to say we've had some cost around it, as probably every business has in one shape or another, that frankly you just absorb and plan as best as you can and get on with life, and it doesn't do any good to moan about it.
You had been stockpiling. We
had, and so we built our stock levels up towards the end of March, and that can't just happen overnight. So that has to happen right back into the supply chain in the factories that make the products. And so building our stock up towards a potential hard Brexit date, which didn't materialise, and we've been since then moving that stock through the business. But as we stand here again today, as we come into our peak period of the business, we will again need to start to build stock unless there's evidence of a Brexit deal being in place.
You mentioned the health of consumers at the minute, because of course you're hugely reliant on consumer confidence, on the state of the housing market. To you, they are resilient.
Well, so no, I think, if you look at the market, housing transactions are down, and we sell big ticket electricals, and big ticket electricals track the housing market very accurately. So there has been a definite impact in the overall market, but we are a growth business. We are in a growth sector. The market is fundamentally migrating online. And as we accelerate a better proposition into that for the customer, then I would hope that we would accelerate that migration.
Okay, so your growth comes from changes in consumer behaviour.
Yeah, I think we help to drive that consumer behaviour. And back to your point of earlier, in terms of what we're doing on mindset, is we are putting the customer absolutely back front and centre of how do we get back to driving the proposition. We invented things like same day, we invented next day, we invented 7-day delivery, we invented gas installations at the point of delivery. What are the next things that we can do to leverage our infrastructure for the benefit of consumers? And so I think we can use those things to drive customer behaviour, not necessarily to drive the total market.